When avoidants finally realize that you've genuinely moved on and built a fulfilling life without them, they often resort to their most desperate and psychologically revealing manipulation, publicly rewriting the narrative of your relationship to preserve their ego while attempting to regain control over how others perceive the situation. This final move represents the complete breakdown of their usual emotional defenses and reveals the depths of their narcissistic injury when confronted with evidence that they were replaceable and that losing them actually improved your life. The trigger, when reality becomes undeniable. The public story rewrite typically occurs when avoidants are confronted with undeniable evidence that you've not only moved on, but are thriving in ways that make their absence appear beneficial rather than devastating. This evidence might include seeing you in a healthy relationship, witnessing your professional or personal achievements, or observing your obvious happiness and confidence that clearly doesn't depend on their presence or validation. The trigger moment often involves a specific incident that forces them to confront the reality they've been avoiding. Perhaps seeing photos of you looking radiant with a new partner, learning about a major life achievement you've accomplished without their support, or witnessing your social media presence that demonstrates genuine joy and fulfillment that they're not part of. What makes this particularly devastating for them is the recognition that you haven't just survived without them. You've flourished. The narrative they've maintained about being necessary for your emotional well-being crumbles when confronted with evidence that you're happier, more successful, and more emotionally stable without their presence in your life. The timing of this realization often coincides with their own life becoming less satisfying or more challenging, creating a painful contrast between your apparent growth and their stagnation. This comparison forces them to confront that their emotional limitations may have been holding you back rather than protecting you, and that losing them was actually a gift rather than a loss. Their psychological defenses, which have been gradually weakening as evidence of your independence accumulates, finally collapse entirely when they can no longer maintain the illusion that you need them or that your relationship with them was the best thing that ever happened to you. This collapse triggers desperate attempts to regain control through narrative manipulation. The public nature of their story rewrite becomes necessary because private attempts to contact you have failed, and they recognize that their only remaining option for influence involves appealing to your social circle or attempting to damage your reputation in ways that might force you to respond or defend yourself. Most importantly, the trigger represents their recognition that they've lost not just you as a person, but their role as an important character in your life story. Seeing you write new chapters that don't include them forces them to confront their own irrelevance and motivates desperate attempts to insert themselves back into your narrative through whatever means necessary. The desperation behind this final move stems from their inability to accept that someone they took for granted could completely move beyond their influence and build a better life without them. This reality challenges every assumption they've held about their own importance and desirability, creating psychological crisis that demands immediate action to restore their sense of significance. The mechanics of public story rewriting. The public rewrite strategy involves systematically distorting the truth about your relationship history, their behavior, and the reasons for its ending to create a version of events that preserves their ego while potentially damaging your reputation or credibility. This manipulation is sophisticated and often subtle enough that observers who don't know the full truth might find their version plausible or even sympathetic. They typically begin by positioning themselves as the victim of your unreasonable expectations, emotional instability, or inability to appreciate their love and commitment. In their revised narrative, they become the patient, understanding partner who tried desperately to make things work with someone who was too damaged, demanding, or immature to recognize their worth. Your legitimate emotional needs become reframed as excessive neediness or emotional manipulation in their public telling. your requests for consistency become portrayed as controlling behavior. Your expressions of hurt about their emotional unavailability become evidence of your inability to respect their boundaries or independence. The story rewrite often includes selective memory that highlights any positive things they did, while completely omitting their emotional distance, inconsistency, or hurtful behavior. They may describe themselves as devoted partners who were unappreciated, generous lovers who were taken for granted, or committed individuals who were abandoned by someone incapable of recognizing genuine love. They frequently employ what psychologists call DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender, where they deny their harmful behavior, attack your character or mental health, and position themselves as the real victim of the relationship dynamic. This technique is particularly effective with audiences who don't have complete information about the relationship's reality. The public forum they choose for their narrative often depends on their social circle and the platforms where they believe they can gain the most sympathy or support. This might include social media posts, conversations with mutual friends, discussions with family members, or even professional contexts where they can paint you as unstable or difficult. Their timing is typically strategic, often coinciding with moments when you're particularly happy or successful, as if they're attempting to undermine your achievements or cast doubt on your current well-being. They may also time their narrative around events where they know mutual friends will be present and likely to discuss relationships. The sophistication of their manipulation often includes just enough truth to make their lies believable while omitting crucial context that would reveal their distortions. They may acknowledge that you had issues in the relationship while failing to mention that those issues were direct responses to their emotional unavailability or inconsistent behavior. Most insidiously, they often incorporate language and concepts from therapy or self-help culture to make their version sound psychologically informed and credible. They may use terms like toxic, codependent, or boundary violations to describe your behavior while presenting themselves as the emotionally healthy party who recognized the dysfunction and chose to protect themselves. The social manipulation campaign. The public story rewrite typically evolves into a broader social manipulation campaign designed to isolate you from mutual friends, damage your reputation within shared social circles, and create doubt about your character or mental health among people who might otherwise support you. This campaign represents their attempt to win the social divorce when they couldn't win you back directly. They often begin by strategically sharing their revised narrative with mutual friends who they believe will be sympathetic to their version or who may not have enough information to recognize the distortions. They present themselves as reluctant to discuss the relationship, but feeling compelled to set the record straight when asked about the situation. The campaign frequently includes subtle undermining of your current happiness or achievements by suggesting that your success is temporary, your new relationship is a rebound, or your apparent well-being is a facade hiding deeper problems. They may express fake concern about your mental health or suggest that you're not dealing with things in a healthy way. They often recruit allies by positioning themselves as the reasonable party who wants to move on while painting you as someone who can't let go or who is spreading lies about the relationship. This recruitment is particularly effective with people who prefer to avoid conflict and want to believe the most charitable interpretation of everyone's behavior. The manipulation extends to social media, where they may post content designed to suggest that they were the committed partner in a difficult relationship. This might include old photos with captions about trying to make things work with the wrong person, or quotes about being unappreciated or misunderstood. They frequently attempt to control the narrative around your new relationships by suggesting that any new partner is a rebound, that you're not ready for healthy relationships, or that you're repeating unhealthy patterns. This allows them to position themselves as the standard against which your future relationships will be measured. The campaign often includes attempts to maintain relationships with your friends and family members, while subtly undermining your reputation through expressions of concern, backhanded compliments, or innocent questions about your well-being that plant seeds of doubt about your emotional stability or judgment. They may also engage in what psychologists call flying monkey behavior, where they recruit others to gather information about your life, relay messages, or advocate for their perspective. These intermediaries often don't realize they're being manipulated and genuinely believe they're helping resolve a misunderstanding. The social manipulation frequently includes attempts to make you look petty or vindictive if you try to correct their narrative or defend yourself. They position themselves as trying to move forward, while suggesting that any attempts you make to tell your side of the story are evidence of your inability to let go or your tendency toward drama. The psychological motivations behind the rewrite, understanding why avoidants resort to public story. Rewriting reveals the depths of their psychological injury and the extent to which your successful moving on has shattered their carefully constructed self-image. This desperate behavior stems from multiple psychological needs that your independence is threatened or eliminated entirely. The primary motivation involves preserving their ego and self-concept in the face of evidence that contradicts their beliefs about their own importance and desirability. Seeing you thrive without them forces them to confront that they may not have been as valuable or irreplaceable as they assumed, creating narcissistic injury that demands immediate repair. Their need to maintain control over how others perceive them becomes paramount when they realize that your success without them tells a story about their limitations that they cannot tolerate. The public rewrite represents their attempt to control the narrative before others draw their own conclusions about why someone would be happier without them. The story rewrite also serves their need to avoid accountability for their role in the relationship's failure by shifting blame onto you and reframing their emotional limitations as reasonable responses to your supposed dysfunction. This externalization of responsibility protects them from the painful self-reflection that genuine accountability would require. Their desperation to be seen as the victim rather than the perpetrator of relationship damage motivates elaborate narrative construction that positions them as the injured party who gave their best effort to someone who couldn't appreciate or reciprocate their love. This victim status provides sympathy and support while avoiding responsibility. The rewrite often serves their unconscious hope that damaging your reputation or credibility might somehow force you to engage with them to defend yourself, providing the contact and attention they've been unable to secure through other means. Any response from you, even negative, feeds their need for continued relevance in your life. Their need to believe that they were the better partner in the relationship motivates systematic distortion of your contributions and their limitations to create a version where they were generous, patient, and committed while you were demanding, unstable, and ungrateful. This revision protects their self-image while demonizing you. The story rewrite also serves their need to maintain the possibility of future reconciliation by suggesting that your current happiness is temporary or artificial, and that you'll eventually realize your mistake in leaving them. This narrative keeps hope alive while explaining away evidence that contradicts their desired outcome. Most fundamentally, the public rewrite represents their inability to accept that they lost something valuable through their own emotional limitations and behaviors. Rather than facing this painful reality, they create an alternate version where the loss was inevitable due to your character flaws rather than their relationship failures. The content of their revised narrative. The specific content of the avoidance public story rewrite typically follows predictable patterns that reveal both their psychological needs and their limited understanding of healthy relationship dynamics. These narratives are designed to maximize sympathy for them while minimizing accountability for their behavior. They often describe themselves as having been extremely patient and understanding with someone who had trust issues, emotional problems, or unrealistic expectations about relationships. This framing positions their emotional unavailability as reasonable accommodation of your supposed psychological dysfunction rather than evidence of their own limitations. Your need for emotional consistency becomes reframed as clinginess or neediness that made the relationship feel suffocating and unhealthy. They describe themselves as someone who valued independence and personal growth, while you wanted to merge completely or lose yourself in the relationship. They frequently claim that they tried everything to make the relationship work, including going to therapy, making compromises, or attempting to meet your needs, while omitting the reality that these efforts were minimal, temporary, or half-hearted. This allows them to appear committed while suggesting that your standards were impossible to meet. The narrative often includes suggestions that you were emotionally manipulative, using tears, threats of leaving, or emotional intensity to try to control their behavior. Your natural emotional reactions to their inconsistency become reframed as strategic manipulation designed to force them into uncomfortable levels of intimacy. They may describe the relationship as having been toxic or codependent, using these terms to suggest that the dynamic was mutually harmful, while positioning themselves as the party who was strong enough to recognize and address the dysfunction. This psychological language makes their narrative sound informed and credible. Your requests for communication about relationship issues become portrayed as constant drama or always wanting to talk about feelings that made the relationship feel like work rather than enjoyment. They present themselves as preferring positive, fun interactions, while you were focused on problems and emotional processing. The story often includes claims that you were jealous, possessive, or tried to isolate them from friends and activities, reframing your natural desire for prioritization in their life as evidence of controlling or unhealthy behavior. This positions them as the victim of your supposed possessiveness. They frequently suggest that you were not supportive of their goals, career, or personal growth, when the reality may have been that you simply expected reciprocal support and investment in the relationship. This allows them to appear ambitious and growth-oriented while painting you as someone who held them back. The narrative typically concludes with them expressing relief about ending a relationship that was bringing out the worst in both of you, while suggesting that they hope you'll find someone who can better meet your high-maintenance needs. This ending allows them to appear magnanimous while still undermining your character. The impact on your social circle. The avoidance public story rewrite can have significant impact on your shared social circle, creating confusion, taking sides, and potentially damaging relationships that predate your romantic connection with them. Understanding these potential consequences helps you prepare for and navigate the social aftermath of their narrative manipulation. Mutual friends who lack complete information about the relationship's reality may find the avoidance version plausible, especially if it's presented skillfully and with apparent reluctance to discuss private matters. People often prefer to believe charitable interpretations of everyone's behavior and may accept explanations that allow them to maintain relationships with both parties. The manipulation can create division within your social group as different people receive different versions of events or interpret the same information differently based on their own relationship experiences and biases. This division can be particularly painful when it involves friends you expected to understand and support you. Some friends may become uncomfortable with the conflicting narratives and choose to distance themselves from both parties, rather than trying to determine who's telling the truth. This loss of social connections can feel like additional punishment for a relationship that has already caused significant pain. The avoidance campaign may be particularly effective with friends who have their own avoidant tendencies and who therefore relate to the narrative about being overwhelmed by a partner's emotional needs. These individuals may see themselves in the avoidance story and provide validation for their version of events. Professional or career-related social circles can be especially vulnerable to reputation damage if the avoidant chooses to extend their narrative into work contexts. Suggestions about your emotional stability or professionalism can have lasting consequences that extend far beyond the personal relationship. Family members who like the avoidant or who have their own relationship issues may be susceptible to their narrative, particularly if it confirms their existing concerns about your relationship choices or emotional patterns. This can create lasting family tensions that persist long after the relationship has ended. The social impact often extends to new relationships, as the avoidance narrative may reach potential partners through mutual connections, creating obstacles to future romantic development. Their story about your supposed emotional problems or relationship dysfunction can follow you into new social contexts. However, the manipulation campaign often backfires with people who know you well and who observed the relationship firsthand. These individuals may recognize the inconsistencies in the avoidance narrative and become more supportive of you as they realize the extent of the emotional manipulation you experienced. The public nature of their story, rewrite, sometimes reveals their character to people who hadn't previously seen their manipulative capabilities. Friends who witness their narrative campaign may begin to question other aspects of their personality and lose respect for their integrity and emotional maturity. Protecting yourself from the narrative attack. When faced with an avoidance public story rewrite, protecting yourself requires strategic thinking about how to respond, or whether to respond at all, while maintaining your dignity and emotional well-being. Your response strategy should prioritize your long-term reputation and peace of mind over immediate vindication or correction of their lies. The most powerful response is often no response at all, allowing your life and behavior to speak for themselves while refusing to engage in public drama or defensive explanations. People who know you well will recognize the inconsistencies in their narrative, while those who don't know you well enough to see through their manipulation aren't worth your energy to convince. When you must address the situation, focus on facts rather than emotions, and avoid getting drawn into detailed defenses of your character or relationship behavior. Simple statements about your commitment to moving forward positively are more effective than point-by-point refutations of their claims. Maintaining your own integrity by refusing to engage in similar narrative manipulation protects your character while highlighting the contrast between your approach and theirs. Taking the high road consistently demonstrates emotional maturity that makes their campaign appear petty and vindictive by comparison. Document their public statements and behavior in case their campaign escalates to harassment or defamation that requires legal intervention. Keep screenshots of social media posts, save text messages or emails, and maintain records of incidents that might become relevant if their behavior crosses legal boundaries. Strengthen relationships with people who know you well and who can provide reality checks and emotional support during this difficult period. These trusted individuals can also serve as witnesses to your actual character and behavior if their narrative campaign becomes more serious. Consider limiting your own social media activity temporarily to avoid providing them with ammunition for their narrative or appearing to engage in similar behavior. Focus on real-world relationship building and activities that demonstrate your well-being without creating online content they can misinterpret or use against you. If the campaign affects your professional life or creates serious consequences, Consider consulting with legal professionals about your options for addressing defamation or harassment. While this should be a last resort, protecting your livelihood and reputation may require formal intervention. Most importantly, remember that their desperate need to rewrite the story actually confirms that you've successfully moved on and that your life without them is threatening to their ego. Their campaign is evidence of your strength and success rather than proof of any wrongdoing on your part. The long-term consequences for the avoidant. While the immediate goal of the public story rewrite is to preserve the avoidant's ego and social standing, this desperate strategy often creates long-term consequences that ultimately damage their reputation and future relationship prospects more than simply accepting responsibility for their behavior would have. People who witness their narrative campaign often form lasting impressions about their character, emotional maturity, and ability to handle relationship challenges with dignity and grace. Their willingness to publicly disparage someone they once claimed to love reveals the aspects of their personality that many find disturbing and unattractive. The manipulation campaign often exposes their narcissistic tendencies to people who hadn't previously recognized these traits, leading to re-evaluation of their character and potentially damaging their relationships with friends, family members, and professional contacts who lose respect for their integrity. Future romantic partners may learn about their public story, rewrite through mutual connections, creating concerns about how they might handle future relationship challenges or breakups. Their willingness to publicly attack an ex-partner becomes a red flag that warns others about their potential for similar behavior. The psychological energy and time they invest in maintaining their false narrative prevents them from engaging in genuine self-reflection or personal growth that might actually improve their relationship capacity. They remain stuck in defensive patterns that prevent authentic emotional development. Their campaign often backfires by keeping them psychologically attached to you and the relationship rather than allowing them to move forward genuinely. The ongoing effort to control your narrative maintains their emotional investment in your life and prevents healthy detachment. Legal consequences may emerge if their campaign crosses the line into harassment, stalking, or defamation that causes genuine damage to your reputation or well-being. What begins as narrative control can escalate into behavior that has serious legal and financial consequences. Most significantly, their desperation to avoid accountability prevents them from learning the lessons that might help them build healthier relationships in the future. By externalizing all responsibility onto you, they ensure that they'll repeat the same patterns with future partners who will eventually leave them for the same reasons. The public story rewrite ultimately reveals them to be someone who cannot handle the natural consequences of their own behavior with dignity or emotional maturity. This revelation damages their long-term prospects for genuine connection and respect, far more than simply acknowledging their mistakes and taking responsibility for their relationship failures would have. Understanding the avoidant's final desperate move of publicly rewriting your relationship story helps you recognize it as evidence of your successful recovery and growth, rather than a genuine threat to your reputation or well-being. Their need to attack your character publicly actually confirms that you've moved beyond their influence and built a life that makes their absence appear beneficial rather than devastating. The best response is often to continue living well while allowing their behavior to reveal their character to anyone willing to observe objectively.